There's government texts, of course, that Congress has obtained. Katrina Pearson was someone who was the liaison to the White House, as you know. And she said in a text to Mr. Meadows, at the time chief of staff, very powerful guy, that she was concerned you were, quote, moving forward, again, I'm quoting, with, quote, the original psycho list of speakers that day, and that she, Ms. Pearson, would rather leave than be a part of you embarrassing the president. What was she talking about? Her view there is that somehow you were pushing a negative, embarrassing, and extreme agenda or set of speakers at the rally. Your response?
Right. I think it's similar to the Thomas text. I think it is these text messages that Congress has gone in and taken from hundreds of thousands of different ones over a year's time, and then they are selectively leaking just in little pockets of time different information out to embarrass folks. And so I think it is wrong. It is kind of grotesque almost to even have to listen to those happening and play out like that. I mean, at the end of the day, there were two separate events. There was an event at the White House Ellipse, and then 1.5 miles away, some bad actors took place and violence at the Capitol. But the erased distinction between those who were involved in organizing or attending a First Amendment protest at the White House Ellipse from those who were involved in violence at the Capitol has become a hallmark of Speaker Pelosi's efforts to embed the events of January 6th into the American psyche and to indict and humiliate those of us who are in political dissent.
Well,
there is going to be an endless number, I would imagine, of isolated text messages that they just leak out to fit a certain narrative. But I would, caution Americans from going into that game.
Caroline, you're raising something really important that has become a real fault line in the discussion of this, and that's why I appreciate you coming on, because let's discuss it. When someone says there's a free speech right for people to peacefully gather and speak and share their views about the election, including their criticism of the election, that's absolutely free speech, and that absolutely is a part of the American tradition. When then a bunch of people from that same place and gathering go and do violence and do an insurrection, that's bad. And so with Trump summoning them on the 6th, those people came. Many of them, as you know, went to the speech part, and then that was a warm-up, a proverbial insurrection pre-party for going to go do violence at the Capitol and do the insurrection. So I take your point that the speech part is protected and there are people who didn't go. But a lot of people did, which is why this is such a big deal. So when people hear you say and other organizers say it as if they're completely divorced, I mean, how many people were at the rally and how many people violently trespassed and breached the Capitol? Do you know the numbers?
Yeah, the overwhelming majority of those in Washington, D.C. on January 6th did not participate in violence at the Capitol. It is very much overwhelming. It was hundreds. I've seen reports of hundreds of thousands of people who were there that day, and there has to be personal accountability here. I think if someone did partake in violence at the Capitol, then they are personally responsible for that. In the same way that if someone storms a stage at the Oscars and protests violence, they are personally responsible for that.
Will Smith definitely wrong to do violence. When you say what you think the rally was, which you helped plan, the numbers matter. So you just gave me hundreds of thousands. Do you know how many people breached the Capitol, roughly estimated?
I do not.
So it was about, according to multiple independent estimates, and they've got a lot of data on this, they've got a lot of documentation, as you know, it's about 10,000 people who were at the January 6th rally, and it's 2,000 who breached the Capitol. So that means that 1 out of 5 people, roughly, who were at your rally went from there to go do crime. Yes.
Those numbers are very off-base. There was way more. If you look at those pictures of people who had come to D.C. who were at the White House.
Those are the rough estimates. So the 2,000 is a lot of people. You would understand why that's more than a handful of bad apples, right? That was a very large number of people because they were able to breach the Capitol Police who are armed. They were able to do violence. Right. You saw them overwhelm it. What do you say to people who look at this rally and say, yes, you have the right to speak and gather, but you helped plan an event that furnished a road for 2,000 people to go do this violence. Isn't that wrong? Don't you condemn that?
Oh, sure. I condemn any forms of violence and any act of violence. But I will not apologize for assisting others in gathering in their nation's capital to air their grievances of government in a peaceful way, which is what happened at the White House Ellipse. There was no disturbances at the Ellipse. The event was lawfully permitted and a peaceful protest, and I believe that is a primary pillar of American democracy.
But the 2,000 people, you see, They heard the speeches there, they heard from the president, and then they went and attacked the Capitol. He told them, go to the Capitol. So don't you think that if you could do it over, here's another way to say it, because I recognize your free speech rights, and I think this is an important conversation for people to hear. If you could do it over, would you want the president at the time not to tell people to go march on the Capitol?
I think it's very hard to look back and relive. I've no involvement in the speech writing or anything like that. That was not a role that I play. Like, my role as a VIP advisor was to assist in the seating and credentialing process, which is, again, a role I've done at hundreds of rallies at many different political candidates and events. And so going back in time, that would never have been my role to play
right,
there.
I'm not asking you who's your role at the time.
Certainly, I think that
yes,
people,
go ahead. You think what?
I was just going to say, yeah, certainly, like, the events that happened later that day were very difficult to watch and a bad day for democracy. But I do think it was an isolated number of people. There was a lot of people there who had every right to be in D.C.
You made that point, and that's on the record. But Donald Trump should not have told all those people gathered at your rally to go march on the Capitol.
No, he has the right to say anything that he wants to say, and I do not believe that one led to the other.
You don't believe him sending those people fired up from there to the Capitol. You think that had nothing to do with it? You understand that strains credibility. I mean, again, I respect you coming on the program.
Yep.
I respect that you cooperated with the committee. People are listening to you, and it sounds logical up to a point. The free speech part, the gathering. But when roughly 1 out of 5 people go do that, and we know what they did, they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." They were trying to kill members of Congress, and Donald Trump sent them to march there.
You're pulling out select phrases to help fit a narrative. Like, everyone there was not chanting,
I'll let you
Mike
respond,
Pence.
but I'll finish and I'll let you respond. It's not a narrative. It's what they said and did. They attacked the police officers. We've seen the video, and it was a real significant portion of the people, and they went because of the president's words. And so it's confusing, unless there's a political reason, it's confusing to not be able to say, given what you know now, if you are against the violence, you're telling us you're against the violence, we want to take you at your word, then wouldn't you be against the sending of the people who did the violence?
Yes, I've said multiple times since I've been on here that I condemn any violence that would have happened, but it was not my experience and what I saw that day. At the completely peaceful and lawfully permitted event at the White House Ellipse, I saw way more than 10,000 people, first of all. And then in my immediate line of sight, the people I dealt with, there were, nuns, students, Christian, like, totally peaceful. And a lot of the people came and then went home. And also, I think it is also a little bit dishonest to not actually look at the timeline of events that happened. As I mentioned earlier, the White House Ellipse is 1.5 miles away from the U.S. Capitol. And when the president, even you said earlier, was speaking, it's now very much known and documented that there was already disturbances happening 1.5 miles away at the Capitol. And then for those individuals to even make it all the way down there in time, the timing doesn't even work out. And so, and saying 1 in 5 individuals is also, I think, intellectually dishonest. It was not 1 in 5 individuals. I think that there's many, many press reports that will show way more than 10,000 people were in Washington, D.C. that day and spread out. And so I don't think those numbers are correct.
Yep. Well, Caroline, as mentioned, you cooperated with the committee. You agreed to come on and take the questions. We appreciate that. People can have their own reactions and evaluations, but I appreciate you taking the questions.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Thank you. Caroline Wren.